Hi everyone. I want to kindly welcome all of you to the Sanction Scanner Compliance Meetup series. Thank you for joining this session today. My name is Sevde and I'm Digital Marketing Specialist at Sanction Scanner. I'm delighted that Nadine has joining us today. Nadine will talk about the future of electronic payments and compliance challenges. Her presentation will take approximately 30 minutes. After the presentation, we will have a question-answer session. So, if you have any question, please just write them down in the message section. Thank you, Nadine, again for joining us, and this stage is yours.
Thank you, Sevde, for the introduction. Thank you, Sanction Scanner, for hosting me today and for granting me the opportunity to speak in this webinar. Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to extend a cheerful welcome to all of you. Your participation with us is very important. Please join me in interacting and discussing one of the most important topics in our field, which is the future of electronic payments and the compliance challenges that are associated with it. It is inevitable that the payment industry be subject to a lot of challenges and a lot of money laundering risks. However, before talking and discussing those risks and challenges, it is very important to understand the various methods of electronic payments and try to project ourselves in the future of those payments. The future is digital. Okay. Businesses will now have to connect with their clients and find out a way of creating new products in order that these products will be more suitable to their clients. The way we make payments now and the way we make transactions is changing and forever. As we all know, cash is no longer king, and the more the use of the cash is being reduced, digital and contactless payments are becoming now the norm, which pushes us and which leads to a cashless society. Since the start of COVID-19, we have witnessed a reduce of the use of physical cards and an increase in the use of virtual cards. And this is a trend, in my opinion, that will continue to increase in the future. A rise of digitization and related online service and the related online services to it is also a new change in the industry, and this is something that will continue as well to increase in the future. The more businesses will try to adapt and innovate during these hard times. So in your opinion, what will replace cash and basic credit cards in the future? Consumers are becoming more and more demanding and are requiring now new products that facilitate their lives, which lead businesses to invent and start adopting new payment methods in order to satisfy the need of their customers. So what are these new payment methods? We have several ones. I'm going to name some of them and explain a little bit about them before moving to the risks and the ways to mitigate them and the challenges in our industry. Some of these payment methods are, for example, the contactless credit cards. Those are cards that have an embedded chip inside them, and they emit like short-range radio waves. By using a contactless card on a POS machine, by tapping the card on the POS machine, the client can simply make the payment. Another way of online payments is the payments with mobile devices, and here we can divide them into several categories. The major ones are, and the most famous ones, are the digital wallets. Those are systems that store the payment card information inside the mobile device, and the client will make these payments through his mobile device, through this wallet. Okay, and those are the ways of payment that provide convenience and quickness in the way of doing payments. Another way of doing payments through mobile devices is what we call the QR code. The QR code, QR stands for Quick Response Code, and this is a way of doing payments by scanning the QR code and doing the payment. Another way of doing payments through mobile devices is the most common one, which is the mobile banking. It is simply whenever the client tries to do his transactions by using all the financial transactions by using his mobile device. The third way of doing payments is the wearable technology. And this is a category of technology tools that we use. Either we wear them on our body, or we put them on our clothes, or we embed them inside our body. One of the examples is the Apple Watch that a lot of us use. Another famous method of doing online payments is the biometric payment. And this is a way that we use in online payments in order to identify the user and authorize the payment from a bank account by using a biometric. The most important one is the fingerprint. Another one is the card, the biometric card, whereby instead of using a PIN, we will use a biometric, which is the fingerprint, in order to authentify the transaction. Another famous method of online payment as well is the voice payments. It is whenever the client tries to do a financial transaction by sending a voice payment to his device, and the whole transaction is being done. Lastly, we have the blockchain technology, which is a system of recording information that facilitates international payments by using a ledger and without the need to pass through an intermediary like correspondent banks and clearing agencies. Now, after we have discussed all these payment methods, what are the challenges, the major challenges that are facing the online payment industry nowadays? Regulatory changes, financial misconduct, and AML rules are one of the major changes that are facing our industry. The reason why is that banks and financial institutions are now obliged to know and to be up to date with all the AML rules in all the countries, and failure to do so will lead to banks to pay a lot of financial penalties and will destroy big time their reputation. Another challenge in our industry, and this is one of the biggest challenges, is the cyber security breaches. The more businesses and the more banks and financial institutions are becoming digitized, the more cybersecurity becomes what we call the cost of doing business. Cybersecurity breaches such as malware or phishing are becoming more and more increasing and more sophisticated in a way that the administrators of the banks and the systems that the banks are using are becoming unable to detect correctly these breaches, which leaves the administrators of these systems in the banks with a lot of false positives, and they have to now spend a lot of time in order to solve these false positives instead of solving the real problem. New banking models is as well a new challenge in our industry. As you all know, we need to use technological tools and technological models and systems in order to do our sanction screening, in order to do our monitoring reports. And the question here and the challenge here that is being asked by all the banks is whether to buy new banking models or whether to develop these banking models internally. The last challenge, which is in my opinion one of the biggest challenges, is the complexities in the regulations. We all know that regulations are here to set the rules and to protect the banks, but at the same time, regulations and regulators are posing some of the challenges. And the reason why is that the regulators are playing the role of the watchdog in our industry whenever a new product is being introduced. Why is that? Because they want to make sure that all the products that we are introducing are very transparent and they create a protection for the clients. And that's why, for example, now the use of new products and new techniques are going to be more regulated in order to protect the clients. Let me give you, for example, the new AI regulation that has been introduced in Europe recently. With this regulation newly introduced, the algos that we need to use now will be more regulated than before. Now, what are the money laundering risks to which the online payment industry is exposed to? The nature and level of money laundering risks to which our industry is exposed is directly correlated to the nature of the market and the businesses in which we operate. However, there are a number of risks and factors that need to be considered whenever we are assessing our money laundering risks. For example, if we facilitate transactions and facilitate payments in high-risk jurisdictions, it means that we are facilitating money laundering in these countries. Also, not to forget that if we operate with a little bit of effective controls, we will be also participating in the money laundering system of these countries. Not to forget, as we mentioned before, the cyber security risks and the theft of funds and the failure in technology, which are all risks that our payment industry is exposed to. So what are the ways? Of course, for every risk, there is a way to mitigate this risk as much as we can. What are the various ways in order to mitigate the risks? How we do this, it is pretty clear that the AML risks in the payment industry are imminent, and that their consequences on the financial institution are really huge. Yet there are numerous ways in order to mitigate their risks. Here I'm going to cite several examples of how to mitigate those risks. For example, by asking a lot of questions when we do our due diligence, by trying to learn about money laundering schemes and impose some strong due diligence procedures. Also, by focusing on enhanced due diligence and establishing a formal anti-money laundering policy and procedures, and making sure that these policies and procedures are being well applied at all levels of the institution. Whenever we onboard a client, we have to figure out whether this client is an individual or a company. We need to know whether this client is connected to a politically exposed person or not, because this imposes a lot of risks on the institution. Also, understanding the beneficial ownership structure is very important in order to know who stands behind the company, or who stands behind the account or behind the funds that we are using. And we have to apply the beneficial ownership rule, which is the 25% that is imposed, that is recommended by FATF. Implementing efficient fraud control measures is a very good technique in order to mitigate the AML risks. And one of the most important as well is the adopting strong transaction monitoring and reporting, and also automating sanction screenings and scrubbing the list or the database of our clients against all the negative or all the blacklists that are provided internationally. Developing an efficient risk-based approach is also a good technique of how to mitigate those risks. And in this approach, we can divide the clients, or we can study the client from various aspects, whether his employment, the country that he is living in, the source of funds, the volume of their transactions. And we develop a risk-based approach whereby we categorize the client on whether he is a low risk or a high risk or a medium risk client. And based on his profile, we decide on how often we review his profile and his account and his due diligence. Also, making use of AI applications, artificial intelligence applications, is very important in order to mitigate the AML risks. And also making sure that we have good quality data while ensuring data protection is something very important, because if our data is not correct and it is not accurate, it is practically impossible to review the trend of their clients. Implementing official security standards is very important as well as in our industry. I'll give the examples of the PCI DSS, the 3D Secure, and the EMV technique. In conclusion, electronic payments are very important to our ecosystem as they continue to expand globally, and big changes are happening in the industry. It is everyone's responsibility to do something about protecting this industry from the offenses of money laundering and terrorist financing activities. Thank you for listening, and I will give the lead now to Sefde if there are any questions, and we are welcome to answer them. Sefde, any?
Thank you. Thank you for presentation.
Yeah, I can see some questions here from Mr. Khalid Hassab. What is the inherent and residual risk in e-payments and how could it be mitigated? Yeah, I think what we have discussed previously in the last two slides about the risks and the various ways of how to mitigate them. Mr. Hassab, if anything is still not clear, I can answer additional questions. But we have listed all the risks and what are the various ways to mitigate them. I have another question here from Mr. Ahsan Habib. What is your thought on buy now, pay later items? These payments may also pose compliance challenges. Well, from a compliance point of view, I don't see any risk, but I see the risk from a credit point of view. This is a very valid question. Those are platforms such as the Afterpay platform. Like each platform, electronic platform, we have advantages and disadvantages of these platforms. I'm going to list the advantages of these platforms, which are convenient. They provide convenience, they provide a quickness in doing the transactions, and they provide like a systemic way of paying these loans that are going to be the payments are going to be distributed over time. However, there are a lot of disadvantages in using these techniques. One of them is that we induce the consumer to buy things that maybe he does not need, or to increase the late payments. Also, this is a risk. Also, these platforms, they provide minimal credit checks, which leaves the institutions with a lot of late payment fees and a lot of unpaid loans. And it induces the clients also to give more spending, to do more spending. So those are, from a credit risk point of view, I can see them, but from a compliance point of view, I don't see any risk in them. What are the challenges specific to real-time payments? Those are the same challenges that we have discussed. All of the challenges that are, like we discussed before, the major challenge is the cybersecurity risks. We have another challenge, which is the regulatory. I mean, the change in the regulations and the more and more imposing new regulations. This is another challenge. Also, the new models, which model to implement and which model we are going to use is also another challenge. And as we said, also the change in the AML rules is one of the big challenges in our industry, because we have to stay up to date in these rules, and failure to not continue being up to date in these rules will lead us to pay a lot of penalties, and it will ruin our reputation, as we said. So I guess we have no more questions, Sefde?
Yes, thank you very much for your answer. It seems that we answered all the questions. And it was a quite information meeting. Thanks again. And that's enough for now. You can't find a recorded version of this webinar at sanctionscanner.com. And we also have a podcast version called Extra. See you in the next meeting. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you for participation.
Thank you, Sefde. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. It was really a pleasure for me, and hope to see you soon.